Welcome to Special News Channel. The mighty attacks of the Ukrainian armed forces, which have continued for the last 2 months, finally achieved another great success. The victory of the Ukrainian armed forces had great repercussions all over the world, as the Russian army announced its withdrawal from Kherson with its latest statement. The Kherson operation has been going on for about 2 months. This operation, which was designed with a perfect strategic genius, was stitched together, and the Ukrainian commanders used this strategy ingeniously. Slowly advancing from the Mykolaiv area, the Ukrainian troops began to advance, retaking some settlements in Kherson, and placing HIMARS in these areas facilitated the hitting of the Russian troops in Kherson. A perfect bombing was carried out for the next ground operation. HIMARS hit the target in the eye, and the Russian army was helpless against these long-range attacks. The ground operation carried out in the past 2 weeks, on the other hand, showed us an adventure that the Russian army followed desperately. The Ukrainian armed forces surrounded and destroyed the Russian forces on the western bank of the Dnieper River, which runs right through the middle of Kherson. After these raids, the Kremlin ordered that its army be dispatched to the west bank of Kherson. The Russian army finally began to flee, but behind them was a chasing Ukrainian armed forces. This showed that they would not be able to evacuate easily from the region. With the recent events, the Kremlin announced that it has withdrawn from Kherson, the apple of its eye. Russia's defense minister announced on television on Wednesday that President Vladimir Putin has ordered the withdrawal of Moscow forces from the strategically important southern city of Kherson as a potential blow to the war effort. But Ukrainian officials have expressed doubts that the Russian will withdraw completely. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, at a televised meeting with the military's top commanders, said that the commander of Russia's forces in Ukraine, General Sergei Surovikin, told Mr. Shoigu that the decision is difficult, but that the withdrawal will save the lives of the soldiers and that the forces are ready. However, there are a few questionable issues which we need to address here. The Russian army in Ukraine has been suffering heavy losses for about 5 months. The Ukrainian armed forces has vomited blood against the Russian army in the last 5 months of the war that has been going on for 9 months. The Ukrainian armed forces has vomited blood against the Russian army in the last 5 months of the war. However, the Kremlin did not take any steps back and watch the dissolution of its army. But now, they say they will withdraw. General Surovikin, standing in front of a lectern and pointing to troop movements on a blurred map of Ukraine, cited the relentless bombardment of Ukraine and the difficulty of protecting the crossing points and possible flooding of the region as the main reasons for the withdrawal. Under these conditions, a full supply to the city of Kherson and the surrounding settlements cannot be made, Surovikin said. After a thorough assessment of the current situation, I propose to start the defense on the left bank of the Dnieper River, he added. Continue the withdrawal of troops and take all measures to ensure the safe transfer of troops, weapons and equipment to the other bank of the Dnieper River, Shoigu replied. Ukraine had warned that Russia might try to withdraw in hopes of drawing Ukraine into urban warfare. According to Roman Kostenko, a colonel in the army and chairman of the Defense and Intelligence Committee in the Ukrainian parliament, the army was watching for signs of a Russian retreat until Wednesday, but the Russian army was completely displaced from Kherson city and the surrounding Russian bridgehead on the west bank of the Dnieper River. He was not convinced that he intended to withdraw. We have signs of withdrawal, Colonel Kostenko said in a phone call. They blew up bridges that would allow our forces to advance. We see them leaving their population centers, but in some they are leaving the soldiers behind to hide their movements, he added. He said that Ukrainian intelligence agencies are working to evaluate Russia's movements and noted that the Russian announcement may be a misdirection. Ukraine does not want its operations, which it has been carrying out with great secrecy and care for months, to be destroyed by a lie put forward by Russia. Kyiv carried out very sensitive operations and put a lot of effort into creating today's scenario. If Russia has set a trap, they will do their best not to fall into it. Mikhailo Podolyak, a senior advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, was more cautious, saying the country does not trust Russian television statements. Actions speak louder than words, he wrote on Twitter. We see no sign that Russia left Kherson without a fight, Podolyak said. Deep concern about the announced withdrawal ran through reports from influential Russian military bloggers throughout Wednesday. The decision is shocking to the thousands and millions of people who fought for Russia, died for Russia, believed in Russia, and shared the beliefs of the Russian world, said Yuri Kotyonok, an influential blogger. Retreating from the city of Kherson would be a great victory for Ukraine, which has long sought to recapture it and push the Russian troops from the western bank of the Dnipro. It is the only regional capital to be captured by Russian forces since the invasion in February, and the withdrawal will also be a humiliating rout for Putin, who Western intelligence officials say has rejected previous requests from commanders to be allowed to withdraw. Kherson, an important Black Sea port, fell under Russian control less than a week after the invasion. About 340 miles from Ukraine's capital, the shipbuilding city is an important node for access to the Black Sea and a gateway to Crimea. The Kherson region was also one of the 4 regions that Putin illegally annexed in late September. Colonel Kostenko said on Wednesday evening, Ukrainian troops had entered some of the frontline villages under Russian control before Moscow forces withdrew earlier in the day. Informants of the Ukrainian army also reported that Russian soldiers had left towns and villages far from the front. They're leaving step by step, he said, moving the heavy guns first, leaving an infantry rear guard to guard the retreat. It is unclear whether Russian forces have withdrawn from the city of Kherson, he said. We don't know how far we will go tomorrow, he said of the Ukrainian army's advance into areas abandoned by the Russians. The loss of Kherson city represents a symbolic blow for the Kremlin and its ambition to conquer all of southern Ukraine. At the same time, some Western military experts say that withdrawing from the city itself to the east bank of the river would make tactical sense given the vulnerability and relative isolation of the Russian troops stationed there. For this reason, if the Russians are to actually withdraw, this withdrawal will have 2 consequences. One of them is that Russia can no longer use Crimea as a safe port, because after Ukraine completely captures Kherson, it will transfer the Harpoon missiles in their hands to the region and completely remove the Russian ships from the Ukrainian coasts in the Black Sea, especially from the Crimean coasts. The second consequences of the withdrawal of the Russian army from Kherson would mean the paralysis of all shipments to the Crimea. The loss of this region will be a great psychological blow for Russia, as the war has long been thought to be unraveled in Kherson. At the same time, the fact that Russian President Vladimir Putin made such a move after he announced that he annexed Kherson has told us that the annexation decision is a completely invalid statement. On the other hand, Kirill Stremusov, deputy head of the administration appointed by Russia in the Kherson region, died in a car accident. Once an anti-vaccine blogger, Stremusov had a reputation as one of the foremost faces of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and frequently posted offensive anti-Ukrainian videos on social media. Russian President Vladimir Putin posthumously awarded Stremusov the highest state award, the Order of Courage.